puzzling things. And some of these things, they weren't one-offs. I mean, he's gone back to the well again and again. He said some puzzling things. But, this past week, at the conclusion of a gun control speech, he said one of the most baffling things that he's said in a while. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. And I just want to let you know, we're not doing Freak Out Friday. We left that in the 9 to noon hour. But we are going to be taking potentially some calls later on in the show. And if in any of these areas, any of these topics, you got something to add, especially if there's some info you have that we don't have. If there's some inside baseball that you've got that we don't have, please feel free to call on in and let us know. But Dez Dickerson with you. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We're going to be right back. Yes, indeed. Well, that's nice and mellow, isn't it? You gotta love a nice silky riff, deftly going from acoustic to electric guitar. But I digress. So, I'm going to call this next bit here "Riding with Joe Biden on the Disoriented Express." And again, it's not my intention to disrespect the office, but the American people are being disrespected. We're like right here. We see this. Okay, we're like right here. So,
You want to see my temper? Keep going.
I would like to see his temper, because right now I think he has distemper, but that's a whole other. Whoa, I didn't say that. Okay, so and when you think it can't get weirder, it gets weirder, and it is what it is. But at the end of a recent gun control speech in I think it was Connecticut, the last thing he says before he leaves the podium is "God save the Queen, man." And not just "God save the Queen," it was "God save the Queen, man." And, last I heard that the Queen is still dead. So it's just really weird. And if you've seen the clip, he also does the thing that he does where he's waiting for someone to give him a cue as to which way he's supposed to go. He looks one way and points and looks up, and he's waiting, and then he points the other way. And it's elder abuse at this point. What they're doing to this man is so disrespectful to him. They're disrespecting the office by disrespecting him. I mean, obviously he wants to be there, but man. So, but I want to juxtapose, because there's some statements that the usual boilerplate stuff that Joe had to say about guns and gun control, but I want to juxtapose those statements with some statements by another rapper. I know I didn't intend for this to be Hip Hop Day, but another rapper and activist, a guy named Killer Mike, who told interviewers that he doesn't want to see any new gun laws put in place as an attempt to curb gun violence in his hometown of Atlanta, and explained that criminals are not going to follow laws. I've said that right in front of this mic. A whole bunch of other folks have said that in front of this mic. More laws are not going to impact the lawless. But, the unreality cohort, and that's my term for those on the left side of the aisle, the unreality cohort doesn't make that connection, because it's about the ideology. It's not about reality. So the artist, whose real name is Michael Render, spoke to TMZ about rising levels of gun violence in Atlanta, which has seen 66 shooting deaths since the start of 2023 through May. And 56 of those deaths were black men. So he said, we know that there's just a massive problem with gun violence in the country. You were opposed to any new gun laws, or at least any new ones, TMZ's Harvey Levin remarked. So he said, no, I'm a strong proponent for the Second Amendment, and people know that. That's Killer Mike's position. I think that there are enough laws on the books to take care of what's already out there. Criminals are not going to follow a law anyway. Just common sense. He's a clear thinker. It's just common sense. The chief identifying characteristic of a criminal is that they break the law. They don't follow the law. So the host of the show challenged the rapper about comments he previously made, in which he stated families should own 5 guns. You've said that you want particularly black families to be educated about gun ownership, and that they should have multiple guns, all sorts of guns. And he retorts, I've always just said 5. You should have a revolver, semi-automatic pistol. You should have a shotgun. You should have one bolt action rifle. You should have a semi-automatic rifle. That last one is the one I'm talking about. Why the military style rifle? Of course, that's the knee-jerk reaction of the cohort always. And Mike says, I said semi-automatic. Military is fully automatic. So it's not military. They never get that right. It just looks cool. It can look like a race car, but it doesn't go 200 miles an hour. So the fact of the matter is, he goes on to say, I'm simply going by the rules that were given to me in the Constitution, nothing more and nothing less. And he was addressing, the curfew at the time in the city of Atlanta, the what he had experienced as a kid, as a young man, back in the time of the Atlanta child murders, back in the 80s, et cetera. But criminals aren't going to follow the law. Now, in his Queen speech, Biden not only, went back to the same old tropes, but he compared kids in elementary school to military personnel in Iraq and Afghanistan, that they were in similar kinds of war zones. And then in the context of that, he again kind of went off into his thing about, I've been 48, 50 times in Iraq and Afghanistan and et cetera. So we're going to continue talking about this when we come back from the break because, you can't make this stuff up. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson will be right back. All right. It's Dez. Let me try that again. It's Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy today. And again, apologize for the vocal problems. You know, it's funny. I was just fine yesterday. And then around dinner time, just this thing kind of crept into my vocal cords. And, you know, it's one of those things where pretty much most of my life, I mean, I started playing music professionally at 14 and you know, I've been a singer all that time. And so you become accustomed to, you know, what they call vocal hygiene and, you know, taking care of yourself and taking care of your voice. Like an athlete takes care of their body, you take care of your voice. But every once in a while, you know, there's just something that it hits and there's nothing you can do about it. It's, you know, it's like, you ever seen like a football player, especially, just suddenly have an Achilles snap? That's one of those injuries. It's unmistakable when you see it. And, you know, it's not like they were doing something wrong, not like they weren't in shape. Just all of a sudden, it just snapped and rolled up like a window shade on them, and that was that. So anyway, so we're talking about Joe Biden and the speech that he made recently regarding gun control and kind of went off script a little bit. But he made a speech at the National, just to provide context, National Safer Communities Summit in West Hartford, Connecticut. And he said, we've reached a tipping point in this nation with gun violence during his speech. That's the point that he made. So he compared American soldiers serving in the Middle East to children in U.S. schools. Folks, there's a lot. We have a lot to do. And it takes courage to tell the story because you know, I spent a lot of time as president. And I spent 30-some times visits, many more days in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I watched. You know, we have post-traumatic stress, they call it, for soldiers. What's the difference between post-traumatic stress that a soldier meets in the hills of Afghanistan and a fourth grader meets in the classroom when they have to duck and cover? No, I'm serious. So President Biden has been inconsistent in how many times he claims to have visited Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, he throws that out as kind of a foil to his story, an illustration to his story. But then we get into the same Joe Biden that was kind of drummed out of a presidential race, not once but twice for making stuff up and for plagiarism. So in May of 2022, he said, I've been in and out of Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, I mean, over 50 times, 48 times. In December of 2022, he declared, and you know, I think that it's, I think it's 38 or 39 times now. So we're kind of accustomed. We've grown accustomed to Joe being kind of the Where's Waldo of American politics. You know what I mean? It's like he was out there with General Patton, I think, or it was, you know, him and Corn Pop or, you know, Pop Tart or Tony the Tiger, whatever.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Corn Pop. Now, of all the names, okay, if I wanted to make up a name for somebody that was just like a stone cold gangster, I don't think it would be Corn Pop. I don't think it'd be like some character I expect to see in a box of cereal at Kroger. Anyway, Corn Pop.
Should have been Ice Pop.
I know. Corn Pop. And the kids love to feel the hair on my legs. Was that not the creepiest statement you've ever heard? Anyway,
well, coming from him, that one's almost tame. Coming from him,
that's true. That's so true. So, to say the least, his statements have been inconsistent, which again speaks to his cognitive competency. Now, the Biden administration admitted in 2019 that the actual number of visits made to Afghanistan and Iraq was 21. And that was in the course of vice presidency, the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. But let's set that aside for a minute. let's take the whole, Afghanistan, Iraq. Let's take that and set that aside. So to top it off, in another speech he just recently made, he said that he plans to build a railroad across the Indian Ocean. A railroad across the Indian Ocean. Okay, well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that technology exists. I kind of doubt it. Sounds kind of far-fetched and fantastical to me, but, he says it's possible. So here's a quote. We have plans to build a railroad from the Pacific all the way across the Indian Ocean. Now, why does this sound like something from Marvel to me? I'm just saying.
Did you know that within a very short amount of time, there's going to be over 1 billion people in India?
They could probably build like a people bridge.
They have like 1 point. I'm sorry. His inability to remember the most basic facts about the places he visits is just astounding.
It really is. But the man has the nuclear codes. That's even more astounding.
So the only comfort I take in that is he probably can't remember them, and they won't let him see them unless it's really necessary.
They probably gave him like a Roy Rogers lunchbox and told him
they're in there. Read them if you ever need to.
They're in there. Just remember the code is trigger. Trigger. Okay. So he goes on to say, we have plans to build in Angola one of the largest solar plants. Now he kind of hopscotches from the railroad from the Pacific across the Indian Ocean. I would have loved to have heard more, but So plans to build in Angola one of the largest solar plants in the world. I can go on, but I'm not. I'm going off script. I'm going to get in trouble. It reminds me of the guy. There was a summer when I was in my late teens where I was like, in between bands. The band had broken up, and I'm in the process of putting together a new one, and was stringing together some part-time jobs to, pay the bills in the meantime. So I landed through a friend a job on a painting crew in a nursing home. And to be honest, not the painting part, but the being around and getting to know the people was actually one of the most fulfilling things that I'd done to that point in my life, because it actually kind of helped me to get out of my own little, walnut head to see in this other-centered way the lives of these amazing people who had lived long before I was even a thought, and had done things and had contributed things, and had stories to tell. So anyway, it was a fascinating thing for me. And I love the fact that people that I encountered in that nursing home all had stories to tell. And they all had worth, they all had value, all that good stuff. But the problem that I have, because in that environment, the other thing that I also, was exposed to for the first time was kind of the devastation of cognitive decline. And, the reality of how far and how far gone people who have led amazing lives and done amazing things, how far they can go in terms of things kind of unraveling. So again, I try to be circumspect, but at the same time, it's important for us to recognize, man, I mean, we're talking about the Oval Office. We're talking about the greatest nation in the world. At least the last I checked, we still were. That's in flux, it seems. But so the railroad, actually, let me come back around to the point that I was going to make. Sometimes you would have folks in the nursing home that would kind of go AWOL. I mean, it's not like it was a maximum security, but, you would have folks that just kind of wander off. They wandered off after lunch, and sometimes Joe sounds like that to me, and sometimes he looks like that to me. It's like, he's going to wander off the grounds because he's going to go try to find his house, the house that he hasn't lived in 40 years or whatever. So here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. He was afraid he was going to get in trouble. Well, yeah, he's continually getting himself in trouble with the things that he does and the things that he says. And clearly they understand it. They know it. But they keep giving him a live mic, because they're kind of between a rock and a hard place on this thing. Because after all, he is the president of these United States. But, at the same time, it's kind of like Mr. Magoo meets Doc on Back to the Future. It's, again, riding the disoriented express. So if it weren't for the fact, and I have to be honest about this, if it weren't for the fact that he's kind of turned us as a nation into like a soft target / dumpster fire, I'm almost going to miss the comedy. You know what I mean? If it could somehow be done safely, I'm almost going to miss the comedy. Because Weekend at Biden's has been kind of like, again, one of those 70s high school house parties, where someone like filled up the bathtub with Boone's Farm wine and then somebody spiked it with some hallucinogen and didn't tell anybody, because that used to happen. That's kind of what this administration has been like. But at the same time, it's also getting to be like a boxing match where everyone kind of wants the corner man to throw in the towel and end the carnage. You know what I mean? Enough already. He's being pummeled to a pulp. Let's just end it. Throw in the towel and let's just end this. And we'll see where it's all going to go. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I'm Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Yeah, it's running. Yeah. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy. And I may have to just kind of power through the vocal problems, but just doing some kind of like old school, like wrestler, like the Crusher or something. Just kind of power through it that way. And then really trash my voice. So we've been talking about a number of different things. You know, it's a post Freak Out Friday. And I'm just kind of doing the week or the last couple of weeks in review. Just kind of looking at some things, stories that we've all heard, things we're all familiar with, and trying to, you know, flip them over and find something under the underside that we haven't covered yet. But, you know, there's one thing in particular, one story that came to my attention that I found very interesting. And, you know, I talked earlier about the wrist slap. Now we're going to talk about the pimp slap. Because every once in a while, somebody like just really walks into it and thinks that they're really doing something and they're getting the best of someone. And this is going to make, you know, a great sound bite. And this is going to lead the news cycle. And then they just make fools of themselves. So we had one of those. Well, and we had more than one of those. But there's one in particular that I'd like to talk about. So, and this one actually has Tennessee implications because it involves Tennessee Congressman, Memphis, that district, I believe, Steve Cohen, you know, one of my favorites and yours, and him attempting, I say attempting, to go toe-to-toe with John Durham. Now, first of all, yeah, you know, John Durham is a pretty sharp guy. And, you know, you might want to consider, you might want to count the cost if you're going to, you know, try to go at him, but Cohen did. So there's an article, former special counsel John Durham received a round of applause Wednesday after he rebuffed a Democrat who suggested his reputation is irreparably damaged. At a House Judiciary Committee meeting, Democrats grilled Durham about his report investigating the origins of the Justice Department's Trump-Russia investigation. When it was Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat, Tennessee, when it was his turn for questioning, he at first tried to extract comment from Durham about Donald Trump's insults of former Attorney General Bill Barr. And Durham quipped, "That's outside the scope of my report," and the room broke out in laughter. So what followed were several minutes of Cohen asking Durham why he did not investigate allegations that Donald Trump's presidential campaign colluded with Russia. Cohen made assertions of collusion despite special counsel Robert Mueller determining that there was no evidence of collusion. So why did you not think it was a good idea for you to look into and see if the FBI wasn't correct and that there was collusion, a connection between Russia and the Trump campaign to elect Trump? Well, first of all, he just said it's outside the purview of his investigation. Did you want him to try to find Jimmy Hoffa at the same time, too? Silly. My assignment.
Hoffa's pretty easy to find. I mean, he still votes Democrat, so.
That's true. Him and his whole family. They're still voting. You got to love Chicago. So he goes on to say, my assignment was to look at the conduct of the intelligence community agencies, not to conduct a separate investigation that was done by the House or was done by the Senate or was done by Director Mueller. And again, dude, you're supposed to understand this stuff. So that's when it got personal. This is Cohen. You got no convictions. You got nothing. Cohen screamed at Durham. It was all set up to hurt the Mueller report, which was correct and was redacted to hurt the Bidens and to help Trump, and you were part of it. You have a good reputation. You had a good reputation, and that's why the two Democrats supported you. But the longer you hold on to Mr. Barr and this report that Mr. Barr gave you as special counsel, your reputation will be damaged. As everyone's reputation who gets involved with Donald Trump is damaged. He's damaged goods. There's no good dealing with him because you'll end up at the bottom of a pyre. Arr, bucko. But Durham made it clear he does not care what Cohen thinks about his reputation. My concern about my reputation is with the people I respect, my family, and my Lord. and I'm perfectly comfortable with my reputation with them, sir, Durham responded. At that point, committee chairman Jim Jordan said, well said, God bless you, and the room erupted into applause. So here's the thing, and I apologize. I would love to have been able to play sound there, but we have just managed to overcome the apocalypse and landing on the asteroid, and so we're having to kind of go with the children's story hour at the library instead. But see, I kind of put Steve Cohen in the Maxine Waters congressional clown car. You know what I mean? And I don't know if he's the dude with like the big floppy shoes or the car horn or the, like the pink fright wig. I haven't decided yet which guy he is, but he's definitely in the clown car. He's one of those folks. In fact, I think he's in the clown car and in a booster seat. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry, but I just feel that way. So him attempting to step to Durham is like Kevin Hart challenging Mike Tyson to like a 15-rounder. And I don't mean Mike Tyson in his prime because, Mike would have hit him like once just smooth on top of the head and Kevin would have broken apart like a character in a Lego movie, just all over the place. I'm talking about Mike Tyson now. I'm talking about today's Mike Tyson. It's, it would not be a smart thing for Kevin Hart to do. So regarding Cohen, again, I don't want to stoop to insults or mama jokes, even though he doesn't hesitate to try to ambush and insult and excoriate other people. That's just his style, which is one of the reasons I just, I don't really have much respect for him. But it does seem to be warranted somewhat. Let me just say that. With some of the more egregious repeat offenders, who just continue, the Adam Schiffs and the Steve Cohens and the Maxine Waters, whatever. It's hard not to. It's hard to, you run out of other cheeks to turn after a while. But I have to say this. I have to say this about Cohen. I'm going to make this one statement, and then I'm going to move on. Have you ever noticed the dude's eyes just are not right? I'm just saying. Have you noticed his eyes ain't right? Now, he's kind of got investigation discovery eyes. You know what I'm saying? We watch probably way too much investigation discovery at our house. And some of those shows, they'll show pictures of people like when they were 8, 10, 12 years old. And you look at the picture and go, nah, his eyes weren't right when he was in 6th grade. That dude was mayhem going somewhere to happen. Well, I'm not saying, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that there's, some sort of criminal behavior and a double life. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying his eyes aren't right. That's all. And, the eyes are the window to the soul and, all those things. So I think that John Durham got the better of him, and which I would have expected, if you would have, given me the opportunity to bet on it ahead of time, I would have bet on John Durham. But we've had the wrist slap now. That was the pimp slap. At least pimp slap number 1. So we're going to look at, after the break, we're going to come back and we're going to look at a different kind of slap, because there's a thing emerging that I frankly find quite entertaining. And it's like the ultra wealthy class kind of step into one another. And there's been some interesting things that have kind of emerged, but we'll talk about that after the break. Dez Dickerson with you in for Matt Murphy, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be back. Oh yeah, that was I don't know, the hip hop thing is just on me today. It's like an old early hip hop thing. Oh yeah, that's all right. You know what? I think that
You know,
today
that was like one of Flavor Flav's catchphrases, wasn't it?
that's true.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think also all the early like New York sort of b-boy groups. Oh yeah, yeah. And after a while, you just kind of keep saying it. I love Flavor Flav, by the way. I mean, he just came on the scene, and it was like, what in the world?
Even if you don't like hip hop, the man's hilarious.
He's one of the comedic geniuses.
Yes, absolutely.
Of all time, and a true personality. And who else would wear like a full blown clock around their neck? So, there's on the one hand, the political class kind of continues to reduce themselves to this kind of Punch and Judy, kind of farcical puppet show. You ever seen Punch and Judy? Where they just kind of club one another over their heads, and the whole, I guess the puppet show was kind of the precursor of the old Jackie Gleason show or something. Pow to the moon, Alice. It's just, weird stuff that now, there'd be a protective order sworn out, and, you'd be in a world of hurt. But back then it was considered entertainment, different time. But the political class continues to kind of reduce themselves to like a bad puppet show. But the billionaire class, on the other hand, they're far more entertaining, getting more entertaining all the time. And people that are kind of just bubbling under, It's kind of like the Billboard Hot 100, except now it's the Billionaire Hot 100, and you got the folks that are bubbling under that are trying to come on, But at least some of them make far more sense than the political class, and that's why I think that people are finding it refreshing and more entertaining than I don't need to hear Adam Schiff's voice again as long as I live. And you could just go on down the line and fill in the blanks. I don't need to hear Kevin McCarthy's voice again. I'd rather hear Charlie McCarthy's voice than hear Kevin McCarthy's voice, to be honest. And now I really dated myself. But so Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have apparently agreed to meet in an actual cage match. An actual cage match. Now that I'd do that on pay-per-view. I'd rather see that than Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk in an actual cage match. So here we go. Billionaire big tech business titans Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg may face off in a cage match. I'm up for a cage match if he is, LOL, Musk tweeted, referring to Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg shared a screenshot of Musk's tweet on an Instagram story and included the message. Now, notice both of them are using their own platforms. There's no self-promotion in this either. Including the message, send me location. It's like in school, tell me where you want to fight. Down across from the boiler room at 3:30. Send me location.
Behind the buses at 4.
Exactly. I remember one time there was a guy that was like, every school had that one like really pugnacious guy. Wasn't necessarily like the biggest or scariest guy. Tactically, I made friends with those guys. The biggest, scariest guys in school, those were my friends. But then there was also the guy that was the outlier that just, frankly, he just had stability issues. And they just loved to fight and to pick fights just because that's who they were. So there was one time in the lunchroom, these different fads kind of come and go, right? And this fad of throwing nickels so that they fly on their edge and hit people like a Frisbee, except if you get hit like in the cheek with a nickel, that sucker leaves like a welt, like you got punched. So I got hit by one, thrown by, the crazy dude. And this dude, I still remember, I think his name was like Keith Pence, not Mike Pence, but Keith Pence. And And the dude hit me, and I had to uphold my rep. So I challenged him. I said, hey, we're going to fight, and it was one of those, it was the weekend. So it was, hey, Monday. Well, what happened is that night, football practice, I actually, broke my arm. Actually, no, it wasn't a practice, it was a game. So I came back with a cast. So I showed up for the fight, but I had this cast on. Now, truth be told, I was glad to have the out because that dude was crazy. I didn't want to fight him. I didn't want to fight him for anything. But I had to uphold my rep. So, that was one of those.
Dez went and broke his own arm to get out of the fight.
That's right. Stuck it in the doorway. And so anyway, this reminds me of that. Where are we going to fight? So, indicating a willingness to participate in such a fight. And apparently he's serious about it. The story speaks for itself. Meta spokesperson Iska Sarek told Alex Heath of The Verge. See, that's the funniest part. These dudes are serious about it. These, pocket protector dudes are going to throw down. So, Vegas Octagon, Musk tweeted, adding, I have this great move that I call the walrus, where I just lie on top of my opponent and do nothing. See, I just think he's so much more entertaining than any politician. Zuckerberg announced last month that he had earned medals at his first jiu-jitsu tournament. Now, I don't know, I got to tell you, it conjures up images of when your kid's 10 years old and you put him in some kind of martial arts school or on the soccer team or whatever, and you go, Mark Zuckerberg kind of winning his first medals. I kind of think, I kind of think he didn't do a lot of things athletically as a young man. And I'm not, I'm not trying to bust on him or be,
his strengths were more cerebral.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And they worked for him. But, now that he's got some coin, he can kind of go back and get caught up. So Musk has said he does not exercise much. he could just lift some of those bucks and probably get some exercise. I almost never work out except for picking up my kids and throwing them in the air. He tweeted, he has said that during his youth he was picked on and that he was involved in real hardcore street fights. The two business tycoons are direct competitors in the social media space. Well, no kidding, Sherlock. So here's the bottom line. If it were to come down to an actual cage match or any kind of a, like a semi-serious, sanctioned event between the two of them. Personally, I'd take the guy that's been in actual street fights over the guy that, goes to, martial arts classes. Especially, Zuckerberg's not going to the Y. You know what I mean? He's going to, there's some dude that's probably coming in and whatever. But my money is on the guy that's actually been, as a kid, in street fights. Because the street instinct, it does reactivate and come back. If you had to fight for your life, on the real street as a kid, that thing can get triggered. That switch can flip and that thing can come back on. So I'll take that instinct every time. Because you know what? I'm sure Zuckerberg, he's got, moves like Jagger, whatever. I'm sure he's been, getting after it. But like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And if you've done any kind of survival street fighting before, you're liable to pick up a trash can and hit somebody in the face with it or something. You'll do whatever you got to do. So my money, if they do this, my money's on Elon. Plus, I think Elon's he seems to be a stouter built guy. Zuckerberg, it looks like maybe he's been, trying to bulk up, but he's just more of a slight looking dude. So not to be left out, though. Not to be left out. Mark Cuban recently took a pot shot at Musk and Joe Rogan. not to be left out. Now, here's the thing. You know, I used to actually really be, you know, a fan of Mark Cuban, and I don't hate on him now, but you know, he kind of came on the scene and kind of had some swagger, and you know, he kind of disrupted the status quo with respect to, you know, what billionaires do and how they live and whatever, and the way he kind of, you know, made his bones in the beginning. I think starting a company with computer solutions or whatever, like in college, and you know, selling it to CompuServe for 15 million, something like that, I think. And then the real score was well, not what was it? Not television.com, whatever that company was that he sold for like $5.7 billion that actually like sank Yahoo because they spent so much money for it. So, you know, I mean, he hustled his way. Nobody handed him anything. I respect that. But he kind of chimed in and then just sort of ambushed Elon and Joe Rogan. And you know, he does that every once in a while. Every once in a while he'll kind of, you know, come in from off screen and, you know, bounce a shoe off somebody's head or something crazy like that. But he basically said that, I'm going to open up yet another article. He said, "You're driven by self-interest." Mark Cuban claims Elon Musk's Twitter and Joe Rogan are the mainstream online media. So let me just make one comment real quick. What is Mark Cuban driven by, if not self-interest? I don't think he's running a philanthropic organization. Last I checked, but you know, and I don't have a problem with enlightened self-interest. I think that's traditionally what has fueled our economy, made us one of the greatest nations on the face of the planet in the history of the planet. But to accuse them of being fueled by self-interest, that's a little bit like the Pope calling the Catholic black there. I don't know, but that's just me. So it goes on to say, celebrity business magnate, that's a turn of phrase, Mark Cuban has claimed that business tycoon Elon Musk's Twitter platform and podcaster Joe Rogan are the mainstream online media. Quote, "You, Joe, and at Elon Musk's at Twitter are the mainstream online media, and your platforms have become everything supposedly wrong with mainstream media. You are driven by self-interest, just like the mainstream media always has been accused of. And you both have earned that right. You busted your behinds to be great at what you do and earned all you've accomplished. But don't lie to yourselves and all of us and tell us you're different. You aren't." So that was a little bit of a blitz attack, kind of out of nowhere. But here's the thing I think is going on with Mark Cuban. I think Mark Cuban is suffering from decimal envy. That's right, decimal envy. I think and it's not necessarily, Elon has more money than Mark. There's no doubt. Joe doesn't, but Joe has more mojo and more momentum and more notoriety than Mark. And I think, you know, I think Cuban's ego is chafing. He's not that brash guy in the stands at his own Mavs games in a T-shirt. You know what I mean? He's not that guy anymore.
Rogan commands more pop culture attention, too, than Cuban does now.
Absolutely. Because let's just be real. Cuban is kind of a reality show co-host now. You know what I mean? Shark Tank. And we watch Shark Tank. Our 9-year-old loves Shark Tank. But, you know, that's a different thing, man. He's just not what he used to be. So we're going to talk about this some more after we take a break. But, you know, is Mark Cuban suffering from decimal envy at this point in time? Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy. We'll be right back.
Yeah, boy!
Nothing like a synth intro over a shaft hi-hat. So, Dez Dickerson with you in place of Matt Murphy. Of course, no one can take Matt's place. I'm just warming the chair in his absence. And my voice is sort of coming back, and that's a plus. But we're talking about what I call Rich Guy Fight Club, and it's interesting. On the one hand, I hope that first of all, I hope that Elon and Zuck actually follow through on this cage match thing, and I hope they keep a sense of humor about it. And maybe do some kind of throwback to old WWE, you know what I mean? Get some of that old wrestling drama in it. And it could be a lot of fun. And obviously, they could do something for charity and do themselves a little PR favor. But hopefully that. But this thing with Cuban, though, I mean, he's kind of got a burr in his saddle. And part of it, like I said, is I think he's suffering from decimal envy. And, let's just be real. I mean, people have egos. Rich people have egos with a bunch of zeros behind them. And that's, that's not a monolithic statement to be made. There are people who are wealthy and humble, just like there are people who are broke and arrogant or whatever. But at the end of the day, Mark Cuban, he's got an ego. And people with an ego, people who are oriented sort of in an outside-in fashion, don't like to be out of the mix. They want to be, center of attention. So, it is what it is. But we're going to talk about that more. We're headed for the clubhouse turn. I can't believe it. It's really going quickly today. Computer problems and voice problems and all. But we're headed toward the clubhouse turn, headed into that final hour. And we're going to keep talking about Rich Guy Fight Club and some other things, other interesting stuff. So stay with us. Dez Dickerson, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. In for Matt Murphy, we will be back.
It is 2 o'clock. I'm Mac Morey with your top stories, and we've had a overall wet and rainy, thunderstormy week, but we've got some dry, sunny skies these next few days for the weekend. Full weather forecast coming up in just a couple of minutes. Immigration ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court. The 8-1 decision today rejects a Republican-led challenge to Biden administration immigration policies. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, writing the executive branch, has no other option because there is not enough money or manpower to deport all 11 million or so people who are in the United States illegally. Instead, the policy prioritizes the deportation of immigrants who are deemed the greater risk to public safety or are picked up at the border. Louisiana and Texas had argued every illegal immigrant needs to go, which is federal immigration law. And staying in the nation's capital, 15 states have banned or severely restricted abortion in the year since Roe v. Wade was overturned to the states. Democrats see reproductive rights as a major mobilizing issue for the 2024 election. Lindsay Watts has details.
Democrats want to show voters they're continuing to fight for abortion rights. They're bashing Republicans they say are out of line with public opinion. President Biden signing an executive order aimed to increase access to low-cost birth control. And congressional Democrats are introducing new legislation focused on reproductive rights. The measures are largely symbolic, 1 year after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
We'll stand up for reproductive freedom today. We will stand up for reproductive freedom tomorrow. We will stand up for reproductive freedom forever.
In Pennsylvania, a span of Interstate 95 in Philadelphia that collapsed in a fire reopened today. Less than 2 weeks after this all happened, the highway buckled and failed on June 11th after a tanker truck carrying fuel crashed and burned on an exit ramp. Justin Finch with more.
Pennsylvania's governor celebrating the early opening of 6 lanes of Interstate 95 in northeast Philadelphia.
We rebuilt I-95 in just 12 days, and through that process, we showed the nation what Philadelphia and Pennsylvania are all about.
The governor crediting local crews working around the clock and close cooperation between federal, state, and city agencies with speeding repairs ahead of schedule from months to just under 2 weeks.
And work's expected to begin soon on a permanent replacement for the section of highway. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
All right. Rolling into the last hour. I kind of feel like a survivor here. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy today. And trying to do the end of the week roundup. You know, I didn't do Freak Out Friday part 2. I'm going to be in next Friday in the 9 to noon hour, and gonna try to up the ante on Freak Out Friday next week. See where we can go with it. But we're talking about Rich Guy Fight Club right now, though. And again, just a much more entertaining cohort than the political class at this point in time. So, talked about the fact that Mark Cuban kind of went after Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and was critical of them. Tried to give him a backhanded compliment, but was critical of them. And as I said, I'm going to say it again. I think that he's suffering from decimal point envy because Elon's got more money, and from, the bell of the ball syndrome because he's not the darling of the culture the way Joe Rogan is. So, he's chafing at that a little bit, but doing what, guys like that, type AAA guys do. They try to get themselves back in the conversation. So he went in on Musk and Rogan, but he also, I think there seems to be some sort of personal slight. There's something, Rogan made some comments about pharma, and Cuban evidently it owns or is a partner in a company called CostPlusDrugs.com. And he seems to have taken offense to, statements that Rogan has made. Now, here's the thing about Rogan. He's not going to parse his words, and he's not going to be nuanced in what he says. That's not his brand. That's not how he built his brand. He's going to be bombastic, and, that's what he's going to do. So you can't react and be oversensitive. You can't be thin-skinned in your response to that kind of thing. But in this case, something's going on with Mark Cuban. So he seems to be offended by some things that Joe had to say. Now, Joe had offered to donate $100,000 to any charity selected by a guy named Dr. Peter Hotez, California. I don't know how to pronounce the dude's name, but it had to do with a tweet and a criticism that had happened earlier. But he offered to donate if the guy would appear on his show and debate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Democrat presidential primary candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So Rogan made the offer after Hotez, California, had shared a piece in Vice titled "Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation." Because anything you say that they don't agree with is misinformation, whatever. So the piece discussed Kennedy's recent appearance on Rogan's show. So Rogan then jumps in via Twitter and says, "Peter, if you claim that what RFK Jr. is saying is misinformation, I'm offering you $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you're willing to debate him on my show with no time limit." Threw down the gauntlet. So Rogan obviously said, "Hey, I'm going to put my money where your mouth is. How about that?" Now, this other writer from The Atlantic asserted that a medical professional should, quote, never agree to debate with a conspiracy theorist. So these people kill me with their unenforceable rules. By what authority, by what ruling authority do you get to decide? Oh, wait, there is none. You don't get to decide. You don't get to decide. But that's what they love to do, because that's what the unreality cohort does. They are the knights who say knee. They are the tribe of it is if we say it is. But it ain't. So Rogan fired back at him. That would be a great suggestion if you could assure that the industry you were representing wasn't completely captured by heartless monsters who have a history of some of the biggest criminal fines in human history because their deception has cost hundreds of thousands of people their lives. It would be a great suggestion if the industry you were defending didn't occasionally look at human beings as an opportunity to generate insane wealth, regardless of the tragic consequences. But you can't do that. So maybe it would be a good idea to have an effing debate, because Joe likes that word. So that's the backdrop of this whole thing. Now, again, Cuban chimed in because he took offense to that particular remark that Rogan made in response to someone else's remark that was made in response to another remark. And it's so confusing how this stuff happens. But bottom line is this, that, Cuban took issue with Joe's remarks and felt that Rogan had been disrespectful and criticized him for speaking in generalities and blah, 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 defending, costplusdrugs.com. And I don't know that Rogan has ever heard from Dr. Hotez, California, but, we'll keep you posted on that. So here's where I think here's the end of the matter with this whole sort of rich guy fight club. I think ultimately there is something that's happening amongst the sort of, super wealthy, whether it's strictly tech sector, but the guys that were the scrappy startup guys who are now, the guys who can say what they want to say because, they've got the ability. I don't like what's happening with Twitter. I'm just going to buy it. They have the ability to do that. So now you have these guys emerging and really kind of displacing. Nobody really cares about what politicians have to say anymore. Unfortunately, they have marginalized themselves on the basis of their own conduct and the, sort of the squishiness and the weasel-worded decline of the dignity of the offices that they occupy, and that they have been elected to in order to represent the people. So as a result, people are kind of over it. And like I said, the rich guy fight club it's more entertaining. So some other things we're going to move on to. We got a couple more things we're going to cover today. And we may, I don't know, open the phone lines and take a call or two before it's over. Just if anybody's got anything to chime in on with respect to anything we've covered today. And it would be good to hear someone whose voice is actually functioning today, but that's a whole other matter. So Elon, for his part, with his sights obviously set on, bigger and more relevant targets than Mark Cuban. And I'm not saying that Mark Cuban is a scrub by any means. Again, much respect for what he's accomplished in his life and his career. But at this point, Elon is ball in bigger time, as we say. So here's an article. Elon Musk issues simple, stinging challenge to President Biden. Elon's like, well, now let me pivot to the president here. Billionaire businessman and Twitter owner Elon Musk challenged President Joe Biden's social media team to give the 80-year-old the password to his Twitter account Saturday in a tweet thread overflowing with humorous jabs and cold hard fact, which has kind of become his MO. It's about time the super wealthy start paying their fair share, Biden had tweeted from his personal account Saturday afternoon. This would have been a couple Saturdays ago, last Saturday. I've never heard that before. My goodness, that's an original bit of thought. It's time for the super wealthy to start paying their fair share. Again, whose unenforceable rule? Who is the arbiter of what the fair share is? The fair share is more than me. And that generally tends to be the definition. But about 2 hours later, Musk responded with an unusual challenge. He requested that Biden be given the keys to his own social media account, not so subtly suggesting that the gaffe-prone octogenarian doesn't come up with tweets on his own. Now, do you think, maybe? Please give him the password so he can do his own tweets. Please, I'm begging you, Musk wrote, responding to Biden's tweet. Musk's challenge spurred a number of responses, ranging from Dr. Jordan Peterson's quip about the definition of super wealthy being those who have more money than Joe Biden. So here's the thing, and speaking of which, see, here's what I would love to see Elon do. in this particular contretemps. I would love to see him challenge the Biden crime family to pay their fair share of taxes on their graft. I think that would be awesome. I think especially since, I mean, Hunter is filing to, get it prostitution like fees refunded in his taxes somehow. Why not? Why not throw down and challenge them to pay their fair share of taxes on all the money they've laundered? Challenge them to pay their fair share of taxes on all the fees that they're garnering from influence peddling and all these other things. And it's not like it's, they're going to tell us, well, that's been debunked. No. It's on film, dude. Joe bragging about the Burisma bribe. Come on. But that's what the unreality cohort does. They deal in unreality, and they think that they can somehow insist that we do the same. Well, that's not the case. We deal in reality. We earnestly contend for reality. That's what clear thinkers do. So I think that's what Elon should do. In fact, we're about to take a break here in a minute. But if somebody out here in our wonderful Super Talk 99.7 WTN radio audience wants to take a minute and just search some things, I would love for someone to tally up the amount of money that, in terms of reliable published sources that we've seen emerge in the news so far, the amount of money, the amount of graft that's been collected. And that would constitute a tax basis for this challenge. Let's do that. All right. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We will be right back.
Immigration deportations to be limited after the Supreme Court ruling today. Chinese chemical companies charged with bringing deathly drug fentanyl to America, and a Metro Animal Shelter needs some help getting those furry friends a forever home. That and more. 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
We have a furry friend at our house. We have a Landseer puppy, 10 months old. So hang on a second. Don't let the word puppy fool you. So Landseers are a type of Newfoundland. So if you're familiar with Newfoundland, have you ever seen the Jeep commercial, Bell, where they're looking for bear? You seen that commercial? They're looking for bear and they find bear, and bear is this huge brown dog. Well, bear he's a Newfoundland. So we have a Landseer, which is a type of Newfoundland, except they're most Newfies are either solid brown or solid black. Landseers are this like incredible like black and white combination of markings, very distinctive.
Yeah, they look very pretty. I'm looking them up right now.
Well, they're very, very cool. And ours his name is Barkley, actually. I think his son Cannon named him. But, they're just big dogs. So Barkley's 10 months old. And right now, Barkley, he's probably gained 5 pounds since we left the house. But Barkley's at about 115. He's tipping in about 115 right now. And when he's full grown, he'll probably be, 180. And big dogs. But they're so gentle. Big, gentle. So we have a furry friend that, kind of the size of a small horse at our house. And that's a good thing. So,
and he's still a puppy.
And he's still a puppy. That's right. Still a puppy. Here's the one thing about Newfoundlands, though. Beware the fact most of them drool. And I don't mean, just like a little polite drool. I mean long strands of like rubber cement looking like ropes.
Now, slobber. Now I'm having to doubt you because you said not like a polite drool, but he's Canadian, so clearly it would be a polite drool.
That's true. Drool is kind of the national pastime. And, I'm from Minnesota, so I can bust on Canadians too. But fortunately, a small percentage of them don't drool, and so far Barkley doesn't. So we're knocking on wood and trusting that he's going to be a non-drooler. But we're talking about, again, Rich Guy Fight Club, but Elon kind of setting his sights on bigger things and issuing the challenge to the president and the White House staff to let President Biden do his own tweeting. But I think that he should go further than that. I think he should challenge the Biden crime family to pay their fair share of taxes. Because that's one of the things that, President Biden tweeted again recently. In fact, I think on March 18th, President Biden tweeted that the average tax billionaires pay in taxes is 3%. And he said that, well, that's not fair. That's not their fair share. Here's the thing about the concept of fairness. Fairness is actually a specious concept because one man's ceiling is another man's floor. One person's ceiling is another person's floor. What I might deem to be eminently fair, that very same thing might seem outrageously unfair to you, depending on where you sit in that deal. So to some people, a situation that, causes money to be confiscated from one group of people to another, well, they just see that as fairness. But for the people whose money's being confiscated, they see it as patently unfair. So the concept of fairness is a specious and dangerous and actually pointless concept. So I think what Elon should do is issue a challenge. Hey, tally up the estimated total of your shakedown, laundered, pirate booty money, Biden crime family, and pay taxes on it. Pay taxes on that. So he goes on to say, Biden, his staff tweeted, look, I think you should be able to be a millionaire if you can earn it, but just pay your fair share. I think you ought to pay a minimum tax of 25%. Why that number, I don't know. It's about basic fairness. It's for the children. It's basic fairness. Here's the response from Elon Musk. I paid more income tax than anyone ever in the history of Earth for 2021. And we'll do that again in 2022. Adding that he also paid 53% taxes on his Tesla stock options, which must be lifting the average. So, again, this whole fair share, 2021, Musk said he paid over $11 billion in taxes. I think that's pretty fair. I don't know. Call me crazy, but now, paying taxes proportionally, whatever. There's a lot of different ways we could try to parse it, but that's what I think he ought to do. I think Elon ought to throw down that gauntlet and demand that they pay taxes on the graft. I think that'd be good. So we are going to, as we're heading toward the break, we're going to pivot into somebody that somehow is trying. It's like the camel trying to get his nose in the tent. He's trying to get back in the news cycle. A name we haven't heard in a while, Chris Christie. Yeah, a name I haven't wanted to hear in a while. But, there's some Chris Christie's in the news a little bit. There's some stuff that he has kind of piped up and said in the media, specifically a CNN interview. And we're gonna give Chris a little bit of love here. Well, maybe more coverage than love, but we're gonna do that after we take a break. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy, Super Talk 99.7, WTN. We will be right back.
It is 2:28. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. 83 degrees, partly sunny, and it's going to stay that way this weekend. The rain and the thunderstorms expected to go away. Got a full weather forecast coming up in just a couple of minutes. Starting in the nation's capital, a nearly unanimous decision by the U.S. Supreme Court this morning allows the Biden administration to limit immigration deportations to those who pose the greatest public safety risk or who are caught at the border. Not all 11 million people believed to be in the U.S. illegally. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote the opinion, said there's not enough money and manpower, so the Biden administration is limited. And for the first time ever, the Justice Department charging Chinese chemical companies for trafficking fentanyl ingredients into the United States. Lindsay Watts.
Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing charges against executives from China-based chemical companies. They're accused of shipping more than 200 kilograms of fentanyl ingredients to the U.S. The DOJ says enough to make 25 million deadly doses of fentanyl. Here's Garland.
We are targeting every step of the movement, manufacturing, and sale of fentanyl from start to finish.
The DOJ is charging 4 chemical companies and 8 Chinese nationals. 2 of the defendants were expelled from Fiji earlier this month and arrested by the DEA.
And right now in Tennessee, Fox 17 says that Metro Animal Care and Control will be waiving adoptions fees through the end of July. The shelter's dealing with an overload of animals right now, almost twice as many as they can comfortably house. 89 of the 100 dogs right now at the shelter are available to find a forever home. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Nothing like the drama of a drum intro. Not a drum line. That's a whole other thing. Don't get me started on that. At any rate, Dez Dickerson with you. Been good to be back. Yeah, I would have loved to have had my voice with me, but you know what? You can't always get what you want, in the words of that prophet Mick Jagger. And I'm glad to be back. Along with me this afternoon, helping me kind of steer the ship into the dock. We got Bell, we got Mac the Nice, and we have rounded the clubhouse turn. And we're about to hit that 19th hole. But one more thing that I want us to kind of open up here before we wrap up, and that is today. It's today's. I'm calling it our unreality check for today. There's Chris Christie still, and I know I thought that he was gone too. But what I'd like to know is Lou Christie still alive? Anybody remember Lou Christie? The dude was a singer, I think, in the 60s, and sang in this falsetto, like, I think before Frankie Valli and, all those folks. Had a song called Lightning is Striking Again, and I think another one, Two Faces. If I had a voice, I could actually, demonstrate, but I can't. So anyway, I think, can't Lou Christie represent Jersey if he's still with us? So that we can just give Chris a lifetime pass to like Ruth's Chris and just, let him enjoy as many baked potatoes.
Come on now, you don't want to bankrupt Ruth's Chris.
That's true. Another one bites the dust. But, that would be like a great way to entice him out to pasture, I would think. I don't know. And not to be stereotypical, but my man's not going to turn down a baked potato with sour cream. I'm sorry. I know it's not going to happen. So, in his latest attempt in brand differentiation amongst the Republican field, well, let me first of all just kind of share a little bit here from an article. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie announced late last month that he's running for president in 2024. Surprise, surprise, surprise. In an apparent effort to distinguish himself from better performing candidates, translate people that people care about. Christie, presently ranked 7th on average with less than 2 points to his name in the polls, has come out in support of child gender transition surgeries. Now, in plain English, can we just break this down? He's talking about genital mutilation. So, in order to differentiate himself, he didn't get like a new haircut or, pick up a new sponsor.
Lose weight.
There we go. Well, he tried to do that before. I remember back a while, I think last time around when he tried to run, I don't think that went well. And, he's big boned, he's big boned. But really, could you not have come up with some other way to differentiate yourself? I mean, it just seems like there are other options. That's all I got to say. So, the Republican presidential candidate told CNN's Jake Tapper during his Sunday appearance on State of the Nation that he doesn't think the government should ever be stepping into the place of the parents in helping to move their children through a process where those children are confused or concerned about their gender. Now, and I'm not going to get too deeply into this now, but bottom line is, should parental authority ever be subordinate to government interference? No, never. Unless there's some egregious breaking of the law or malfeasance, abdication of responsibility. That should never be the case. Because before God, parents have the primary authority, and they delegate that authority to school officials, etc. Your children are not wards of the state. However, though, when people blur lines and then talk about, oh, again, it's for the children because we don't want children to be confused. And the children are dying. And there's no doubt, and I don't take lightly the fact that, gender dysphoria and other issues are very serious issues that need to be addressed, need to be dealt with. But I also know that what we're doing right now is we're kind of activating the pink elephant syndrome. If you tell people, whatever you do, do not think about a pink elephant. Well, all of a sudden, all people can think about is pink elephants. And when all you talk about is, well, you may be, or you may not be, or you may, then with impressionable young minds, when these things are coming out of the mouths of people who are supposed to be sober-minded authority figures, there to safeguard and protect them, not to confuse them further. You know what I'm saying? So Chris Christie wants to distinguish himself by becoming the Republican champion for, gender reassignment, evidently. So Tapper prompted the response in part by referencing Christie's past support for the transgender agenda, rebuffing the warnings of groups like the New Jersey Family Policy Council. Christie ratified Democrat legislation in 2017 barring public school districts from requiring, I've never heard this particular formation of the word, transvestic students to use bathrooms or locker rooms corresponding with their biological sex. So, first of all, I don't understand why undercard Republican candidates would even go on CNN. I understand why they do, but I don't understand why they don't think that through. I know that they are being encouraged by their handlers, by, conventional wisdom, et cetera, that, it's a forum by which you can reach the undecided and the independent. And I just think that's bollocks. Now, if I was in the UK, I probably couldn't say that word on the air, but we're in America, nobody knows what I'm talking about. So I honestly don't understand. Because here's what's going to happen when you go on CNN, Republican, unless you're Donald Trump and you can just plow through it. They're going to replace your dialogue with the sounds of barnyard animals or something. And they're going to use the term MAGA like it's your middle name, et cetera, et cetera. And you are only there to be a foil for their intellectual dishonesty and for them to put forth their agenda and label you according to the pejoratives, et cetera, that are part of the unreality cohort's language. So I don't understand why people put themselves through it, because it's not winning you anything. And here's the other thing I don't believe. While I'm at it, because I'm about to get up out of here anyway, so I might as well say it. I'm not convinced that habitual CNN viewers are independents so much as they are dissociative. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that it's some vast bastion of fair-minded, independent thinking people who are just looking to be persuaded with a strong, cogent intellectual argument. Don't believe it. I think for the most part, the CNN audience it's a vast lemming line. And people that just, because of the fact that CNN had this sort of brand ID for a gazillion years, there are folks like, my mom and others that generationally, they just never turned it off, but they never really thought it through either. So anyway, that's my take on the whole CNN viewership thing. So to me, the idea of, a Republican candidate, a Republican anything, a conservative anything going on CNN could be like, Tim Scott going on, Klan TV or something crazy like that. I'm going to go on Klan TV because it's an important segment of the electorate. And I think I might be able to persuade some folks to give me consideration. Dude, no, they're not. That's not going to happen. That's crazy. So I mean, I know that politicians and candidates and public figures will continue to do this just as they always have. But consider the fact that the head of the network was fired because he let Donald Trump look too good on their air. They're not there to encourage you or somehow offer you a fair and equal voice and platform. That's not what they're there for. So, all that to say, as far as Chris Christie goes, I just think, let's just give him some Christie cookies and, a Ruth Chris, like, lifetime gift certificate and just send him away to the beach. But, at this point in time, he's really reaching, trying to come up with some way to differentiate himself from the field. I mean, what's next? Wow. All right. It is the tail end of the hour, and we're going to go ahead and go to break here. Dez Dickerson with you on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We're going to come back and put a bow on this sucker and send you on along your way. We'll be right back.
Attorney General Merrick Garland speaks on Hunter Biden plea deal, a Supreme Court decision on deportation of immigrants, and the Philly Interstate repair hits another check mark, and Pride March coming up in New York City this weekend. It's spawning a big police presence. I'm Mac Morey, Super Talk 99.7 WTN, all at 3 o'clock.
I don't want to hear what Merrick Garland has to say about the decision. That's ridiculous. But anyway, you know what? We just got a few minutes left, but I just want to kind of toss in a bonus round here real quick. Speaking of the sort of Republican presidential candidate undercard, and I don't know if his name is pronounced Vivek or Vivek, because I've heard it pronounced both ways. But Vivek Ramaswamy. I just love saying that, don't you? That's just a fun name to say. But he made some bold statements about what he will do as president on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream the other day. And, I just want to read a little bit of it. GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy pledged to pardon former President Trump if elected. He also plans to dismantle the FBI. When the Department of Justice weaponizes police force against people based on their political viewpoints, that already undermines trust in the justice system, Ramaswamy said when asked if his plans to dismantle government institutions like the FBI could cause lasting damage. As if the FBI hasn't caused lasting damage already. Come on, man. When you have large bureaucracies that sit in between local and federal law enforcement agencies, that's a formula for corruption. So here's my take on Vivek. And there's some other stuff. There's other cool stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. Like I said, I'm going to be back next Thursday and Friday in the 9 to noon slot, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. But here's what I think about the approach that he's taking. He's taking that student council campaign approach. You know what I mean? The dude that does the free ice cream in study hall throwdown. You know what I mean? To kind of gain favor and attract some votes. Just, kind of going over the top. But see, here's the thing, though. In terms of his ideas and his rhetoric, I think there's a lot to like. He's an intelligent guy. I think he's a clear thinker. He's most definitely a clear thinker. So I don't sell him short by any means and just, say, hey, he's out there just saying sensationalistic things to get on TV. And I think he's a serious man. But pragmatism being what it is, however, electability has to be considered in the mix in the final analysis. So it's too early. I don't choose horses this early in the race myself. And, I would love to see someone who is a clear thinker and who has the courage of their convictions and is willing to say what needs to be said and mean it with respect to some of these things. There's some serious remedies that need to be applied with, FBI and the Justice Department, so on. So we always need somebody, though, that puts it all out there. And that's really what happened with Donald Trump. He came in and just kind of like, like Arnold in a Terminator movie, and just came in and kicked the doors down. And for a lot of folks, they'd been waiting for someone to do that. They've been waiting for someone to say what they'd been thinking, but nobody seemed willing to say. So we need that. We always need somebody out there kind of doing I'm going to indict Joe Biden for the Jimmy Hoffa, whatever. I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm just being ridiculous. But that's what I'm talking about, though. See, we need somebody that has the Semtech vest and the dead man switch, who just says stuff that makes the talking heads on CNN shoot White Claw out of their noses. That's what needs to happen. Now, some people have accused him of just being in it to build a massive email list, But I'd like to think, he's doing his part to move the needle, as we all should be. Well, once again, thanks so much for spending your time with me. And it's been a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you again, hearing you again, all that good stuff. Have a great weekend. Dez Dickerson in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.